Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this evening's Planning Committee on Tuesday, the 26th of May. Thanks to all those who've come in person and braved the exceedingly hot weather to join us this evening. So before the meeting starts, I have a few announcements to make. The emergency evacuation procedures. In the case of a fire, a bell will ring continuously. If this occurs, please leave the building immediately, following the green fire exit signs out to the assembly point, which is by the War Memorial on Duke Street. If anyone requires assistance, please let me know. Lifts should not be used. Please remain at the assembly point and do not attempt to return into the building until you have been advised that it is safe to do so. Facilities. The toilets are situated on the landing at the top of the main staircase and on the ground floor in the customer service centre. Mobile phones. Please turn off your mobile phones during the meeting. Filming of this meeting. Anyone attending this meeting is entitled to film it, but I should point out that only the councillors, officers and anyone sitting around these tables may be filmed. Members of the public should not be filmed, so please ensure that cameras are pointed only in this direction. This meeting is also broadcast via YouTube and recorded. When speaking, please may I remind the committee to ensure that you turn on your microphone and to speak closely into it. A red light will appear on the middle button to indicate that your microphone is switched on. When finished speaking, please remember to turn your microphone off again. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I've had apologies from Councillors Papa, Rajesh and Tron, and we have Councillor Frascona subbing for Councillor Rajesh.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, which is declarations of interest. All members are reminded that they must disclose any interest they know they have in items of business on the meeting's agenda, and that they must do so at this point on the agenda or as soon as they become aware of the interest. If the interest is a disclosable pecuniary interest, they're also obliged to notify the monitoring officer within 28 days of the meeting. Please can I ask if anyone would like to make a declaration? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. May I be the first to welcome you to your new role. I'm going to declare an interest in item 11. I'm a trustee of the charity that owns Boreham House, and as members will know, Boreham House may well be adversely or beneficially affected by the development, and therefore I will leave the chamber for that matter.
Thank you very much. Any other interest to declare at this point? No, thank you. Members are also reminded that they should come to the Planning Committee meetings with an open mind and to demonstrate that they are open-minded when considering applications. Moving on to item number 4, minutes. Is the committee happy to approve the previous minutes from the 24th of March 2026? Thank you very much. Public question time. We've received a number of public questions this evening for items 11 and 12. These had to be submitted by 7 p.m. yesterday and been published on the agenda page and circulated to committee members. We will hear the questions under the relevant agenda items, and those who have submitted a question will have 2 minutes to read it out. I will call you forward to ask your question at the relevant point. Please can I remind those asking questions that all questions and statements have been looked at by committee members in advance of the meeting, and that it would be helpful if specific points were not repeated. Please also note that if you don't wish to read out your question, it will be taken as read. So we'll move on to the items to consider on the agenda. So this is items 6 to 9, 22/0195 / out and full. It's Zone 1, Chelmsford Garden Community, Pratt's Farm Lane, Little Waltham, Chelmsford, Essex. And 23/00124 / full and out, Zone 3, Chelmsford Garden Community, Bewley Park, Chelmsford. And we're going to consider these items together. We'll hear the report from the officer together, and then we will vote on the individual items. So if I could ask the planning officer to introduce their report and their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. There is no presentation for this application. These applications, they were considered back at Planning Committee on the 15th of December. The purpose of the reports to committee is to seek an extension to the resolution by a 4-month period. So the resolution was to grant planning permission in all 4 cases, subject to the criteria that are set out on page 2 of the report. So that was the completion of the planning framework agreement, which was the overarching legal agreement for the development, approval of the stage 1 master plan, which comprised that document, and the development framework document and the infrastructure delivery plan, the withdrawal of the National Highways holding objection at the time, completion of a SIL reinvestment funding agreement with the relevant parties, completion of the legal agreements for each of the two applications, and the planning conditions as listed in the report, with any details or minor variations to be delegated to the Director of Sustainable Communities. So the report sets out the progress that has been made since the 15th of December committee, and it has been quite substantive and positive. In terms of the planning framework agreement, this was in a substantively agreed form at the time of planning committee in December, and that was pending final documentation being put in place to secure the funding, as members will recall, for the A12 Junction 19 and Roundabout 5 improvements, and these were referred to as the Beaulieu Access Package. Now, the total cost of both of those pieces of infrastructure was 36 million, and at the time it was proposed that Homes England, the developer consortium, so this is the three developers of the three individual zones, and Essex County Council would each contribute 8 million to enable the completion of the works to Roundabout 5. Roundabout 5 is the roundabout that provides access from Beaulieu Parkway to Beaulieu Park Station. So in total, that scheme was costed at 24 million. Homes England had provisionally proposed a further 4 million towards the A12 Junction 19 scheme, and at the time when we came to committee, separate discussions were underway with National Highways to contribute the remaining required funds, which was 8 million. So that would have enabled the delivery of the A12 Junction 19 at a total cost of £12 million. The total cost estimate for the combined package is now 38 million, and National Highways have agreed in principle to fund 40 million as opposed to the 12 million towards the A12 Junction 19 scheme improvements. So since the Planning Committee, Homes England have confirmed the conditional approval to what is known as the Housing Infrastructure Funding Agreement. So this is a funding agreement that they had with the Essex County Council for delivery of the North East Bypass and Beaulieu Park Station. So they've agreed in principle to a material amendment to that agreement to introduce those works, so the works to Junction 19 and to Roundabout 5. And that formal amendment is expected to be signed by the end of July, so obviously post the resolution that was given. Separate funding approvals are also required from Essex County Council, and they are presenting a report to their Cabinet on the 23rd of July. National Highways are expected to make their recommendations to their own committee on the 16th of July. So the timing of those processes are essentially associated with those key funding decisions, as you can see, are third-party decisions, and they're outside of the local planning authority's control. And it effectively means it would not be possible to complete the planning framework agreement by the 15th of June, which was the date set out in the committee report back in December. So the request is for a 4-month extension of time to that resolution to the 15th of October to allow those necessary funding agreements to be put in place, and that then allows the planning framework agreement to be signed and completed. Completion of that agreement then allows the approval of the Stage 1 Master Plan, which is the second point in the resolution. Since the December committee, National Highways have positively removed their holding objection to both applications, and that decision was based on the understanding that the planning framework agreement would be signed and entered by those developers prior to the grant of outline planning permission, which remains the case. The National Highways have acknowledged that the agreement would also contain obligations in terms of occupation restrictions on all three zones, and also that Section 1A of the bypass would remain restricted to bus only until the Junction 19 scheme has been completed, and we will continue to liaise with National Highways and ensure that they have sight of the full wording and content of the planning framework agreement before it is completed. In terms of point 4 of the resolution, we've instructed our solicitors to progress work on the required SIL reinvestment funding agreement. So this is the SIL that needs to be reinvested back into the scheme to achieve affordable, policy-compliant affordable housing on both zones. And positive progress has been made on the legal agreements for both Zone 1 and 3 applications, and there's been regular meetings with the solicitors, the two local authorities and the developers to and negotiate and agree the terms of each of the schedules within the legal agreement. So there have been positive discussions in that respect, and also in relation to community stewardship between the local authorities and the Chelmsford Garden Community Council. As members will recall, they are the intended stewardship body. So all parties are working towards the legal agreements being finalised in June. So having regard to the above, the request is that members agree a further 4-month period from the expiry of the agreed resolution, which would take us to the 15th of October, to allow us time to negotiate, settle and complete the planning framework agreement, the SIL reinvestment funding agreement and the Section 106 agreements for both to zones 1 and 3. Completion of all those legal agreements would then enable approval of the Stage 1 master plan and allow us to grant planning permission for the 4 applications. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we don't have any questions from members of the public on this item. I'd like to invite any parish representatives or ward councillors if they have any questions to speak now. We're not aware of any, but just to check. Nope. Do I have any questions at all from members of the committee at this point? Councillor Dobson.
Thank you, Chair. I was on the actual committee in December when this came through, and I know we went through this in very great detail. Obviously, it's really important that this moves forward. Hopefully, not a daft question. Is 4 months is definitely enough? There is no chance of it going on.
No, we've proposed 4 months. I mean, you can see from the dates in the report that the intention is that the various funding approvals come through in July and that we complete the legal agreements with the developers by the end of June. But obviously we don't want to be suggesting an end of July or August date and then coming back and asking for a further extension. So that's why we've asked for 4 months, just to give us that window of sufficient time.
No, that's fine. And if the worst happens, for example, either of the organisations decide not to go ahead with the funding, is that a possibility, or is it hopefully not?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Given the extensive discussions that we've had with them, and we've been liaising with MHCLG, National Highways, Homes England on a routine basis. So I'm hopeful that's not the case. All the the dates are set in the committee report in terms of the various approvals that were required, and all the organisations are working towards that. They understand the urgency. There's a real impetus from the 2 developers of zones 1 and 3 to get their applications across the line, and obviously that for that to happen, the planning framework agreement needs to be completed. So those funding approvals are imperative for that to happen, in order that we can then approve that Stage 1 master plan before we can approve Stage 2, which is effectively the grants of planning permission. So yeah, everybody is working to the same goal, and there is a lot of focus on achieving that.
No, that's great. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. This item, once it's passed your resolution phase, this 4 months, is it likely to come back to us at planning, or are we saying tonight that this is fully approved?
Provided everything is as per the recommendation in terms of we're able to secure all the necessary agreements, then there's no need to bring it back unless anything fundamentally changes from the resolution. Essentially, the resolution set out clearly the agreements that need to be in place. We would only seek to make any minor variations to things like conditions, but they would have to be quite minor. Otherwise, we will be coming back to Planning Committee, but that's obviously not the intention to do that.
Councillor Hyland.
Thank you. And just the measure of minor, my key concern is the affordable housing elements. Will any adjustments to that be brought back to this committee?
Yes, I mean, obviously the committee reports that came before you in December were quite extensive in terms of addressing the affordable housing position, and obviously it remains the case that we are seeking to achieve affordable housing compliance schemes, which hence the need for SIL reinvestment. And obviously you'll see from the recommendation the SIL reinvestment funding agreement is part of that resolution, so there is no wish to depart from that resolution in terms of the level of affordable housing. don't think there's anything further I can add on that.
Yep, Mr. Potter.
Thank you. So, I mean, the level of affordable housing is you know, a key part of your resolution, and therefore any material difference from that, any change from that would need to, you know, come back to Planning Committee.
Any further questions at all? No. Okay, in which case then we'll progress on to the motions. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to read each one out individually, so bear with me. So I move that for item 6, a 4-month period from the expiry of the agreed resolution, minute PL-24 to the 15th of October 2026, be agreed to extend the period for completion of the Planning Framework Agreement, the SIL Reinvestment Funding Agreement and the S106 Agreement application. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Will all those in favour of the proposal please raise their hand? Thank you. I think that is unanimous, so we'll move on to the next one. So I move that for item 7, a 4-month period from the expiry of the agreed resolution, minute PL-24 to 15th of October 2026, be agreed to extend the period for completion of the Planning Framework Agreement, the SIL Reinvestment Funding Agreement and the S106 Agreement application. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Will all those in favour of the proposal please raise their hand? Thank you, that's unanimous, so I will move on. I move that for item 8, a 4-month period from the expiry of the agreed resolution, minute PL-24 to 15th of October 2026, be agreed to extend the period for completion of the Planning Framework Agreement, the SIL Reinvestment Funding Agreement and the S106 Agreement application. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Will all those in favour of the proposal please raise their hand? Thank you. That is unanimous, so we shall move on. I move that for item 9, a 4-month period from the expiry of the agreed resolution, minute PL-24 to 15th October 2026, be agreed to extend the period for completion of the Planning Framework Agreement, the SIL Reinvestment Funding Agreement and the S106 Agreement application. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Will all those in favour of the proposal please raise their hand? Thank you very much. So that has all been approved. Right, so moving on to item number 10, 25/01780, out land northeast of Littlefields, Danbury, Chelmsford, Essex. Please could I ask the planning officer to first introduce their report and presentation, and then after that we'll have questions from members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an outline application for construction of up to 26 dwellings and associated works on land northeast of Littlefields, Danbury. The proposal would include 35% affordable housing provision as part of that total 26-unit count. This application includes consideration of the principle of development and the development access from the turning head of Littlefields. All other matters of detail are reserved for later consideration under separate reserved matters application process. So you can see here the site outlined in red, and Littlefields is to the west, providing a connection with Malden Road. Littlefields is a cul-de-sac at present, serving 16 properties. The extent of the defined settlement is shown with a pink line here. The defined settlement is the side where the arrows are shown. And you can see the defined settlement is directly to the west of the site and continues south of Malden Road to the east, encapsulating Runsall Green. Highlighted in green here are the well-vegetated boundaries of the site, including numerous mature trees and a veteran tree, which is sited away from the proposed development. The measurements you can see here show that the site is approximately 370 metres from the Triple SI to the north and 275 metres from Garland's farmhouse, a Grade 2 listed building situated to the east. And then shown here in bright pink is the area of the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan allocation site for up to 10 almshouses on a field directly to the south of the application site, and this is known as Site A. The site is generally open and used as a horse paddock with a stable in the north-east corner and a hard-standing track leading to it from Little Fields. Both the stable and track benefit from planning permission and have been in situ for many years. The site is previously developed, but the site is essentially open and officers have considered the application accordingly. Here are some photos of the site and its surroundings. Image 1 shows properties within Little Fields to the north of the proposed site access, with an arrow showing the position of that access. Number 10 Little Fields is at the far end of that row of properties, and outside spaces of which are subject to some reconfiguration under this proposal to accommodate the site access. Image 2 is a similar view looking more directly at the site access, with number 8 Little Fields to the south or the right hand side of that image. Image 3 is looking at the site itself, taken from the interior southern edge of the site looking north towards Runsell View. And the proposed site access would come in from the upper left-hand side of that image. Image 4 is taken from a position standing within Site A, that's the neighbourhood plan allocated site directly to the south. You can see the application site's southern vegetated boundary to the left of the image, and we're looking across Site A towards the south side of Malden Road, where the defined settlement continues eastwards. Image 5 is taken from Runsell Green near to from Runsell Lane near to Runsell Green, which is to the east. And you're looking at distance towards the application site. A clear view of the site is not available from this position. I've annotated the approximate locations of both Site A, which is the allocation site, and the proposal site. The field in the foreground is agricultural, and the landscape feature in the middle ground is a vegetated field boundary, not the application site, which is further back. Views towards the site are very sporadic along Runsell Lane, and due to variation in land levels across the fields and heavily vegetated boundaries, the site itself, views are very limited and are filtered very well by the natural landscape features. Further along Runsell Lane, the existing village edge north of the application site is a bit more evident, so that's looking towards Runsell View, which is to the north of the application site. And that gives the landscape more of an urban fringe character to this angle of view back towards the village edge. Image 6 is just a closer view of housing lining the southern edge of Malden Road. So this is an indicative layout showing how the proposed 26 homes might be arranged on the site. This is only illustrative, as the layout is a reserved matter under this application. A favourable decision tonight wouldn't approve this specific layout, it would approve the parameter plan, which is shown in the agenda pack, which simply confirms the areas where development is to be sought under a reserved matters application. But it would remain for the reserved matters application to consider the final layout of the development. The parameters plan includes a generous area of undeveloped green buffer to the north and the east. The image on screen shows the road and footpath connection with Little Fields as is detailed within the application. The area of hatchland is what is being provided to number 10 Little Fields to provide alternative parking area to the side of the property, although it has been confirmed that parking to the front of number 10 would still be possible in conjunction with the site access if the occupier were to keep some parking to the front. To the south of the proposal site is Site A, the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan allocated site for up to 10 almshouses. Those almshouses would be single-storey, as set down in the relevant site policy of the Neighbourhood Plan. The allocation policy also requires Site A to introduce a new vegetated boundary, as indicated on green, to screen the views from the east. This composite image on screen shows how the proposal Site A and the existing development in Runsell View to the north provide a largely consistent developed edge to the village when viewed from the east. More consistent than if Site A were developed in isolation without the proposed development. This image also shows how green space will be provided as part of the development proposal. with retained and enhanced green boundaries to provide a consistent green edge, filtering views back towards the village. Public open space provision is to be secured by the Section 106 agreement. Also secured by the Section 106 are 35% on-site affordable housing, education contributions, contribution towards bus service, RAMS contribution, tree planting in line with the planning advice note, and biodiversity net gain. For this item, we have a detailed officer report setting out how the status of housing need relates to how the local plan and Danbury neighbourhood plan are considered as part of this application. The current housing supply in Chelmsford falls short of the necessary 5-year housing supply provision, and a local plan of 2020 is considered out of date as a consequence. This usually means tilted balance is engaged in line with the NPPF, but Danbury neighbourhood plan, which does not adopt this site as a housing site but does adopt other sites, was only adopted at the end of 2024, so remains an in-date component of the current development plan. And therefore, in accordance with the NPPF paragraph 14, the neighbourhood plan means tilted balance is outweighed, the same as though it were not engaged. This means, in this case, that the merits of this application need to be considered based on a standard weight of planning balance. In accordance with Section 38 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, other material considerations need to be considered alongside the development plan. In this case, the evidenced housing need, as it currently stands, is a material consideration. This development provides both market housing and policy-compliant level of affordable housing to help meet the evidence need, which is a material consideration in that context. The weight that can be attached to this positive impact or benefit is judged to be moderate rather than significant to ensure we are affording due weight to the Danbury neighbourhood plan, which in good faith has set out what it understood to be the necessary housing provision for this plan period. Albeit, evidence has now moved on and we're in a situation where this council cannot at this time demonstrate a sufficient supply of new housing. When considered against the policies of the local plan, the Danbury neighbourhood plan, there is no outright planning harm, which would mean this application should be refused. And the planning balance demonstrates that the application, when all the various considerations are considered as one, would amount to a positive development outcome. These are a summary of the planning balance headlines. What's on screen is not a detailed breakdown of the assessment. That's set out in the officer report, and I'm not going to go through that or these headlines as part of this presentation, as the report needs to be read in full, as there's a lot of interplay and jumping about between the different considerations. However, this just illustrates that on balance, and at a glance, the development would result in a quite clearly positive development outcome overall. To conclude in summary, the proposal is contrary to the neighbourhood plan, insofar that this site is not allocated for development. But the development proposed is not contrary to the development plan more broadly. In accordance with National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 14, officers have looked at the likely conflicts between development and the neighbourhood plan that could arise and have concluded there are no grounds, individually or cumulatively, that would warrant refusal of this proposal. The neighbourhood plan does not contain policies restricting, in principle, development outside of allocated sites. It relies on the local plan policies, which have formed the basis of this planning assessment. Housing delivery in the context of a 5-year housing supply shortfall does carry at least moderate weight in this assessment, notwithstanding the neighbourhood plan position. This site is located within the rural area, and the development would occupy a predominantly open area of land. However, the natural attributes of the site, its setting and the scheme proposed confirm that development would not have a harmful physical presence beyond the site boundaries. And the rural area setting beyond the site would retain its same countryside attributes. Likewise, other nearby sites of interest and their setting, where applicable, would not be materially impacted by the proposed development. On planning balance, the proposal results in a positive overall weight. This confirms that planning permission is the correct outcome and no overriding basis for refusal would exist. The Section 106 agreement is not yet finalised, although the officer report confirms the infrastructure to be secured under the terms of a legal agreement. The legal agreement should be completed in the coming weeks. Therefore, the officer recommendation tonight is to approve the development subject to a Section 106 agreement being entered into and conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've got a number of members of public who've submitted questions to read out. Everyone has 2 minutes each, so I will move to those questions. Now, if you could come forward to the microphone when your name is called. So, Mr. McLeod? Would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Martin Grant Land, who are the applicants for this scheme. The application before you was submitted in December 2025. We have been working closely with officers and other key stakeholders pre and post submission, including through formal pre-application engagement. We also engaged with the local community ahead of the submission, which highlighted a range of views on the proposal, including support for development of the site and the provision of new homes and affordable homes. The result of the work completed to date is a well thought out scheme which is sympathetic to the character of the surrounding area. The site is located in a discrete location on the edge of the sustainable settlement of Danbury. It is in easy walking distance of a range of existing services and facilities, as well as nearby bus stops. Access would be delivered through Littlefields, an existing cul-de-sac of homes which was built by Martin Grant in the 1980s. Whilst the current application is submitted in outline, the parameters and illustrative master plan demonstrate how development on the site could successfully integrate with neighbouring residential uses. The proposal provides the opportunity for the council to support much needed housing and affordable housing in a suitable location. Homes will be located within an enhanced landscape framework, strengthened by new planting and open spaces, including play provision. Whilst not allocated in the Danbury neighbourhood plan, in the context of the council's need for more family homes and the discrete nature of the site, we consider the proposals are logical and should be supported. The work completed to support the application, alongside responses received from technical officers and consultees, demonstrates there are very few harms which would arise from the proposals. We therefore support the officer's view that the proposal do not give rise to any clear planning harms and result in no substantive conflicts with the Danbury neighbourhood plan.
I'm afraid your time is up, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to the next set of questions. So we've received questions from Mr. Fletcher, Mrs. Fletcher, who I don't think are here this evening, but those questions have been read by committee members. We have then Mr. Holland, who I believe is here. Thank you very much. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Chair, members of the committee, I'm a resident of Danbury who was involved in preparing the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan. The key issue tonight is not whether 26 houses can fit on this site, but whether speculative development outside Danbury's agreed spatial strategy should be approved so soon after the neighbourhood plan was adopted. The officer report accepts that the site is outside the settlement boundary, it's not allocated in the neighbourhood plan, and there would be countryside and landscape harm. The report is comprehensive and carefully prepared. However, members are entitled to reach a different conclusion on the overall planning balance and the weight given to the neighbourhood plan. The report places significant emphasis on the absence of an explicit restrictive policy. However, neighbourhood plans are expected to contain positive policies and allocations, not blanket restrictive wording. During preparation of the neighbourhood plan, Chelmsford City Council policy advised that overtly negative policies were unlikely to pass examination. The neighbourhood plan process over 7 years established the spatial strategy for the village, following detailed assessment, consultation and independent examination. Importantly, The emerging local plan review continues to support growth for Danbury through the neighbourhood plan allocations and proposes no additional allocations for the village. The report places significant reliance on the site technically being previously developed land, but in reality it remains open character and forms part of Danbury's rural edge. Members are entitled to conclude that the neighbourhood plan carries substantial weight under the NPPF. The countryside and landscape impacts are greater than the report suggests, and approval would undermine the carefully planned growth strategy for Danbury and confidence in neighbourhood planning and the plan-led system. For those reasons, I ask the committee to refuse this application.
Thank you. Can I move next to Mr. Schofield? If you could keep your comments to 2 minutes.
Yes, certainly. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mark Schofield. I've lived in Danbury for 35 years, served as Chair of the Danbury Society and was involved in preparing the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan adopted in December 24. Members have my full written statement, so I will focus briefly on the key planning issues. This application should be refused because it conflicts with the adopted development plan and undermines the plan-led system. This site lies outside the settlement boundary and is not allocated in either the local plan or the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan. Danbury has already planned positively for growth. The Neighbourhood Plan allocated sites following extensive consultation, assessment and independent examination. That strategy has now effectively been reaffirmed through the emerging local plan review, which still does not allocate this site. Chelmsford also continues to exceed housing delivery test targets. While the council cannot currently demonstrate a full 5-year housing land supply, paragraph 14, as has been said, of the NPPF specifically protects recently adopted neighbourhood plans such as Danbury's. Recent appeal decisions, including Tiptree, show that neighbourhood plans can still carry decisive weight even where housing land supply falls below 5 years. Government guidance is clear that where proposals conflict with an up-to-date neighbourhood plan, permission should not usually be granted. Respectfully, the officer's report repeatedly elevates housing benefits while progressively reducing the significance of conflict with the adopted spatial strategy. Members are fully entitled to reach a different planning balance from officers where clear planning reasons exist. In this case, those include conflict with the neighbourhood plan, harm to the rural edge of Danbury, and continuing ecological uncertainty. This issue before members is not whether Danbury should contribute to housing growth. It already has.
I'm afraid your 2 minutes is up.
For those reasons, I respectfully ask members to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've now got a couple of further questions from parish tier representatives and ward councillors. So can I invite Councillor Hessing to speak, please?
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Danbury Parish Council strongly objects to this application. The Parish Council acknowledges the officer report is detailed and carefully prepared. However, the Council respectively disagrees with the conclusions reached on the overall planning balance and the weight that should be given to the neighbourhood plan strategy. The Parish Council believes this proposal conflicts with both the adopted development plan and the principles of the plan-led system. The Danbury Neighbourhood Plan, adopted in December 24, already allocates land for around 100 homes, in accordance with Chelmsford's local plan strategy. The site is not one of those allocations. The level of growth was reached following extensive evidence gathering, site assessment, consultation and independent examination. Chelmsford City Council has itself recognised that future development in Danbury is constrained by landscape, ecology and highway considerations. The neighbourhood plan therefore established a carefully considered spatial strategy for the village. Approving an additional 26 unallocated dwellings immediately following adoption of the neighbourhood plan would undermine confidence in neighbourhood planning and weaken the community-led strategy that has already been agreed. Importantly, the Chelmsford Local Plan Review continues to support the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan strategy and does not propose additional housing allocations for the village beyond those already identified. The Parish Council also remains concerned regarding the suitability of access through Littlefields, the intensification of development at the rural edge of the village, and the impact on the setting of the Grade 2 listed Garlands farmhouse, Key View 3 identified in the neighbourhood plan. While the officer report concludes these harms are acceptable, members are entitled to give greater weight to the cumulative impact on the countryside setting and village edge. Danbury has planned positively for growth. This proposal is speculative, unallocated and contrary to the agreed spatial strategy for the village. For these reasons, the Parish Council respectively asks the committee to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hessing. If we could move on to the ward councillors. So, Councillor Armstrong, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I will actually add now an interest, although I'm not on the committee, because it was raised in the officer report. I am a trustee of the almshouses as stipulated within Site A, but that doesn't affect the notes within.
Yeah.
Fine. I thought it'd be fine, but just as it was highlighted as a part of the consideration, I thought it only good to say. Okay. Danbury College Chelmsford website has 2,036 houses. The village has delivered over 50 new dwellings in the last 10 years. Danbury was asked and successfully delivered around 100 new homes within the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan. The Danbury Neighbourhood Plan process was very difficult to deliver due to the significance of and the congestion already on the A414. Consequently, £20,000 was spent on independent traffic modelling, in addition to the £11,000 spent on the plan, and thousands of hours were spent by countless volunteers, and an officer was employed for 2 days a week just to get Danbury Neighbourhood Plan through to deliver what Chelmsford asked it to do. The new local plan also proposes an additional 4,000 homes in the ward, almost tripling the population of my ward of Danbury, Little Baddow and Sandon. That's above several other ones as well. Officers may provide some technical notes about housing balance when it's got a local plan or not. As of next week, Chelmsford's plan will likely be submitted if we vote it through. Jeremy Potter confirmed at Policy Board last week that once a submission is put in place, there will be more weight added by any person inspecting it. I think it would be morally unfair if we as Chelmsford didn't put the same commitment in because of any worry of any appeal should this go to, especially when considering how much Danbury has put in to deliver a plan that is delivering the houses that Chelmsford needs. Development is inappropriate because of how hard it was. Actually, speaking about the almshouses, it was very difficult just to get 10 houses through that entrance and exit in the highways modelling. I'm surprised how almost 3 times is possible when a third was almost deemed impossible and it was almost removed from the plan. And you mentioned the almshouses are single dwellings, and actually that plan that you shows the whole site, and actually the almshouses will only take up half of that, and we'll have our green buffer to the side. So this development is quite considerably beyond what that's proposing. Obviously, all the technicalities, we are viewing this not on tilt to balance, which I'm very grateful for. I think that's the correct determination. And obviously we'll need reasons if we wanted to refuse this. I think the traffic modelling doesn't factor in the other sites in the local plan and the considerable amount of growth that we're likely to have. The public space proposed, although this is only outline, has very limited connectivity to the development behind and the development to the side, and therefore will be limited benefit to the local area. It does not meet the housing need assessment. A large amount of what Danbury did in its local plan was determine what Danbury needs. And the houses proposed do not meet what we believe is what we need in the area. Danbury was historically split into 4 historic manors, and thankfully we still have fields dividing all 4 historic manors of Runsell, the Central Manor, down at St Clair's and down towards Gay Bowers. That's what makes Danbury feel rural and feel really special, is the environment and the sort of separation of that village nature. The moment we start building to the east on the edge of this defined settlement boundary, in a key view as highlighted within the neighbourhood plan, we lose any sense of specialness, and we might as well just fill in that entire block, which wouldn't be appropriate, and previous applications and inspectorates have deemed that to not be appropriate. So it's not plan-led, and I'm worried about the unmitigated pressure that this will apply on top of a plan that was always sort of daring and asking a lot from us. There's no reconsideration on the schooling, on the roads, on how it will engage within the local area and where the parks are. And consequently, because it's not plan-led, the proposal, although only outline, is not suitable and not what Danbury requires. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Can I move to Councillor Scott?
There's not too much for me to say. I think my colleagues just said it all, to be honest. I would like to first mention Mr. Schofield said something that I was going to say, but I'm also going to add to it. When Mr. Schofield said, well, the council cannot currently demonstrate a full 5-year housing land supply, paragraph 14 of the MPPF, specifically, he said, protects recently, paragraph 14 of the MPPF specifically protects recently adopted neighbourhood plans such as Danbury. What you are asking is, I think, undermining democracy on a plan-led system, and it's very concerning. On a day-to-day basis, I would say highway, just looking at highways, and the road that runs through from Danbury through to Morden, which of course these houses will have to join in with their cars, etc. It is already, just by the Baker's Arms pub, it has the highest pollution of the area. And how much more can we honestly sustain? So I just leave it at that, and I will just go back to saying, because I feel quite strongly about this, that this undermines democracy on a plan-led system. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. If I move now to Councillor Jeeps.
Yeah, I think most of the issues have been covered. I just want to reinforce the issue of the democratic process. What we're asking people to do is engage in a consultation to contribute to the plans of their villages. And I think if they see this just ignored, where will we go in the future when people think, well, it doesn't matter what I do and how much I contribute, I will not be listened to. And I think, albeit it can be overridden, I think at this stage, with a strong local plan going forward, and this particular plan in its infancy, it would seem the very wrong thing to do to disengage the public who have contributed so much and say, thank you very much, but we're going to do what we like anyway. Just one other point. When the committee last went against officer recommendation, the appeal was won for the Fox and Raven. So I think the views of the public, the views of local people are listened to once it goes beyond this committee. So I think if there's any fear of an appeal, you have evidence to say that you will be supported if you went against it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just to mention, we had 2 further written questions from residents, Mr. Thoms and Mrs. Fitzsimons, but I do not believe that either are here. So on that wraps up the questions. Thank you very much. I think we had a number of concerns from residents, so I will hand back over to officers to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick up a few things if that's okay. If there's anything I miss, please ask me to cover that. But
sure.
So I think I'll start with the paragraph 14 issue. So National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 14. I can kind of boil down into a sort of a quick explanation. So what the paragraph actually states, and bear in mind that when it refers to paragraph 11D, that's referring to the tilted balance. It says, in situations where the presumption at paragraph 11D applies to applications involving the provision of housing, the adverse impact of allowing development that conflicts with the neighbourhood plan is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, providing the following apply, and the following do apply, those two provisions the neighbourhood plan meets. So that's where we come to that conclusion that we are bearing in mind the neighbourhood plan. And put simply, what paragraph 14 is saying is there a conflict with the neighbourhood plan, and is that enough, on balance, to turn off the presumption in favour of sustainable development and refuse planning permission? Now, the proposal is in conflict with the neighbourhood plan in so much that the site is not allocated for development. But as the officer report explores in detail, there is no wider conflict with the neighbourhood plan identified. And the recent appeal, the Tiptree appeal that's been referenced, there's been a few different takes from inspectors, but by and large, inspectors in recent appeals have found that the term likely in paragraph 14 should be interpreted as there being some genuine prospect of development being acceptable, even where there is a clearly identified conflict with a neighbourhood plan. And they would be looking at grounds which elevate, using some of their terminology, the proposal in terms of positive balance to approve development. And here we have a scheme which more clearly results in a positive balance, and it's not in direct conflict with the neighbourhood plan. As I stated, the neighbourhood plan doesn't contain specifically restrictive policies. However, we got to that point, that is the plan position. And there are some attributes of this development which do elevate the proposal. Firstly, the site is directly adjacent to a well-connected, to a key service settlement outside of the Greenbelt. Other than town centres or city centres, this is the highest order of settlement and in the hierarchy, and where development should ideally be directed. And that's compliant with our own spatial principles adopted by the council. Secondly, it's actually quite rare to see a site with developments of three sides like this site. Littlefields, which to the west, Runsell View to the north, and the allocated site A to the south, mean this site is not projecting out into the countryside on a limb. It would in fact provide the village with a quite logical and consistent urban edge, and would be softened by a consistent green boundary to boot. Site A in fact makes the site a more logical development prospect and infill relative to the shape of the village. And that's a material consideration based on landscape and rural area assessment, and it is an outcome that does elevate the proposal. I think there were some highway concerns as well. I wonder if it might be worth asking the highway officer to come in on.
So we had a question about traffic modelling and suitability of access. So yes, highways considerations.
Good evening, Chair. I understand this is contentious, and I'd just like to point out this is from a highways perspective. In terms of the Littlefields junction with Main Road, Danbury, the junction itself fully meets visibility requirements in both directions for the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit that it falls within. In terms of the impact to the traffic flows, the Highway Authority is obliged to carry out a junction assessment only where the impact of the proposal would be equal or greater to 5% of the existing flows on the main road. Now the proposed development, it's 26 dwellings. That would generate over the day 73 two-way movements. That's 146 two-way movements. When you put that into context of the approximately 16,000 two-way movements on Main Road, that represents less than 0.5%. It's 0.47%. It's therefore the impact is considered to be acceptable.
Thank you very much. Do we move to the question? Great. Thank you very much for answering those questions. I'd like to open up the debate now for committee members to come forward with any questions or comments that you may have. Councillor Soshin.
Thank you, Chair. I have been reading through the whole set of information that we have on both sides, and I feel that, on balance, we need to go for this development. I have no problem with what the Danbury neighbourhood plan says, but I don't think the balance can be pushed any further over because of that plan. I have helped write a village design statement in the past, and I know there are limitations, although we worked for 6 years to create our plan, and even so, that can be overridden. I find nothing that would change my view on that matter. So I would be in favour of the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Soshin. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to refer back to one of the questions that is on the sheet, which wasn't actually answered tonight, with regards to wildlife and badgers and bats. I didn't pick up any answers from officers on that this evening. Maybe we could perhaps address the questions from Mr. F.
Thank you. Are we able to have a response from officers on the wildlife impact, please?
Yes. Badgers first. Badgers are the question, just just to expand on the question that's been asked. The concern is that the ecological assessment submitted with the application hasn't sufficiently picked up the presence of badgers on site. Badgers are very mobile creatures, and their patterns of activity are subject to a lot of change. There are no sets identified on the sites, and the assessment has been carried out by a duly qualified and competent individual. The site edges of the sites are not going to be disturbed by development. They're being preserved and enhanced as part of the proposal, ensuring the species, so far as it may interact with the sites from outside, can continue to commute along the site edges and can forage within those grounds. And those edges are connected to the open fields to the east, which, if there are badgers present, as they're not on this site, that they'll be somewhere near to the site to the east, presumably. Badger activity in the surrounding area was identified as being present in 2016, and that's some 10 years ago. That was at the time of an earlier appeal. And they may still be present in the surrounding area today, but this development is not removing any sets, and none are present on site. And in any event, if they were outlier sets, then they could be closed under Natural England licence. But we're not looking at closing any sets whatsoever, because there are none present. Condition 6 of the recommendation secures a framework ecological management strategy to ensure that construction is designed around wildlife protections, and that involves that's involved engagement with and visitation by a suitably qualified and competent ecologist. In terms of bats, There was a reference in the statement to equipment malfunction, I think implying that inadequate assessment had been undertaken, but I disagree with that. 2 recording devices were deployed across 3 separate months, August, September and October 2025, and data was retrieved from both devices, although some was lost. A detailed survey report has been provided in the form of a bat survey, and that confirms the presence of bats, which are commuting and foraging along the tree lines, as you'd expect. And whilst the data recorded a loss of individual bat calls, the ecologist has clarified that just comes down to a fairly nominal level of activity. It's nothing extraordinary. It's just to be expected of a mature boundary, field boundary with an arboreal presence. So we have considered the application with a presence of bats, and that's been factored into the officer consideration. And the conditions pick up the various comments there are about lighting and the impact lighting has on the bat species, and that's picked up with conditions 5 and 14 of the recommendation. And we would be looking for bat-sensitive lighting strategy and some dark zones to the edges of the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. When I read through this a few times at the weekend, I just kept thinking back to, it just kept saying neighbourhood plan. And with reference to the village design statement that we just heard, yeah, there was a village design statement period, but because it had not enough weight, this authority encouraged parish councils to adopt neighbourhood plans. Now, I remember when this started because I was a parish council chairman at the time, and I knew how much money, time and effort was going into these plans. And we've now reached a stage where this neighbourhood plan, where the ink is barely dry on it, we're actually turning around and saying, well, it doesn't matter anymore because we are going to override that and do what we want. Now, 4.79 in the 5-year housing plan is not a disaster, but if we're going to keep levering in projects like this to try and top 5%, 5-year plan, sorry, we're going to be in trouble. So I can't support this application. Thank you.
Councillor Sampson.
Thanks. Yeah, if this application was coming with a blank canvas, I think the layout is quite logical. You can see where the boundary of the village currently ends and how it would continue on. They've got nice kind of planting around the edge. You could argue it doesn't jut out into green belt. But the fact is we aren't coming with a blank canvas, and there is a local plan, and that area wasn't marked for development. And given that they have marked enough for development for their needs, it's really, really hard for me, I think, to approve that application, even though it is logical in many other ways. So I think that's where I currently stand.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm finding this really difficult. Given that a lot of work and diligence was put into developing a local plan and money, as everybody's mentioned, I find it quite hard to decide when you can undermine that effort. So I'm struggling at the moment, although I do appreciate 26 houses is not a lot extra. And also, I know, excuse me, I know Danbury has a congestion problem. I've witnessed it. So, but that won't make a huge difference. But I have a real dilemma to make a decision over this because I see these people have put the plan in, but I see there is a way of getting through it legally. So I'm still thinking, but that's my position at the moment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Frascona.
I tend to agree with my colleagues on either side here. It's a very difficult dilemma because in some ways it seems logical to fill in that gap. It's got development on 3 sides. We need the housing overall in Chelmsford, and it will provide some affordable housing. And yet, there is the local plan. Local people have contributed towards it. They should have faith in that system, and it seems wrong to undermine it. Thank you.
Councillor Dobson.
Thank you, Chair. I too have great concerns about the kind of bypassing of the neighbourhood plan. The point I wanted to sort of reiterate was that no additional housing in Danbury is being proposed through the local plan review, despite this particular site was actually promoted through the call for sites process and was scored highly. It suggests the wider need for the housing elsewhere, and officers have obviously previously made a deliberate decision not to increase the housing allocation for Danbury. If so, surely that indicates that the Danbury neighbourhood plan remains relevant and effective. Although the site's otherwise acceptable in planning terms, I'm really concerned about the effects of approving development outside of this plan framework. The neighbourhood plan took 7 years of volunteer effort to prepare and was intended to secure planned development within the village. A number of other sites were also promoted and may have potential merit within the neighbourhood plan, but they were not allocated for a range of reasons. If this application is approved, bypassing the adopted neighbourhood plan, it raises the question of whether the other unallocated sites may now come forward and could well be treated in the same way, and this could undermine the purpose of the neighbourhood plan and open the way to unplanned development way beyond what was originally allocated. So in that respect, Chair, I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Hyland?
Thank you, Chair. Can we go back to the slide that had positive and negative on the screen, please? We caught a glimpse of this.
Can we go
slide.
back to that? Oh, right.
Thank you. We caught a glimpse of this slide, but you can see that the officers have given due merit to a number of areas, but it's quite in the balance. When you look at that, there's quite a lot that could be either way, really, which concerns me a great deal, that we are landing on the side of positive more than the measures on the neutral or negative side. One of the areas particularly that brings me, thank you for that, that brings concern to me is the physical access to the site in between houses. It's almost as if this is a backfill application, and one of the questions that comes to my mind when the officer from Essex County Council was speaking is actually how safe is the access and egress to the current houses. The houses that are already there are now going to have a new flow of traffic. So that's one element of concern for me. The other element of concern for me is how does this application actually comply with DM13? Now, just for the members in the audience, policy DM13 is a designated heritage assets. The impact of any development proposal on the significance of a designated heritage asset or its setting and the level of any harm will be considered against any public benefits arising from the proposed development. The word any within DM13 to me is significant, and there are a couple of heritage assets within that scheme, not far from it. I mean, there was a line drawn, I know, in an earlier drawing. But to me, again, I'd like to sort of just investigate a little bit more as how you think this application complies with DM13. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we've got 2 points to explore there. One is the highway safety point, if we could go to that one first and then look at the DM13 around the listed buildings, that would be great.
Chair, in regard to highway safety, as I've already outlined, the junction design is fully compliant with the standards in terms of visibility display provision. As part of the considerations, we look at the ECC, Essex County Council, personal injury record. This is where recorded accidents that have taken place have actually had a police presence. And there have been none in the last 3 years. In terms of the junction, it's considered to be safe in terms of its design. And there's no indication that there's this small increase. I appreciate, as I say, this is contentious, but in terms of the flow along the road, the small increase would add significant risk and hazard. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Hyland.
So just so I understand your response, a road that currently doesn't exist has had no accidents. Fine. But this is a road that is going to come into a current setting where there are houses that previously didn't have a road coming out to it or going in from it. So how is that assessed as risk-free, according to your response?
Chair, there is no such thing as risk-free. There's always an element of risk. It's whether that risk is acceptable. And the risk is very small on this particular development in terms of its impact. I've already explained, in terms of its impact, it would represent, in terms of the additional vehicle movements, less than 4.5% of additional traffic to Main Road.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we could move to look at the listed buildings and policy DM13.
Thank you. If I may, just to add to my highway colleagues' inputs there, this scheme actually benefits from a road safety audit as well. So the access has been road safety audited. The responses from that have been put back to the designer. The designer has provided a response, the designer being the applicant's highway consultant. They've come back with their designer's response. All of the minor points that have been raised are things like need to ensure that the lines are put on the road correctly, that the curbs are correct, that hedges are clipped back and things like that. They're all very, very minor matters that can be readily picked up either as part of the detailed design and construction of the access, which has to go through a separate highways process anyway. This isn't the end of the road of it, even though this is a detail element within the plan application, or they are matters that are already within the control of the local highway authority. There's also been tracking provided to ensure that even if people are parking within the road, within Littlefields, there is sufficient space to get fire and refuse freighters through and into the access. In terms of the heritage points, so obviously we've got on screen now 275 metre distance to the nearest corner of the site, and Garland's farmhouse, grade 2 listed. The setting of Garland's farmhouse is the most important element of setting to Garland's farmhouse is its agricultural setting, and that was the subject of a lot of discussion at the earlier appeal. I think it was Gladman appeal for the adjacent fields, the agricultural fields. This doesn't touch the agricultural fields. The field that we're looking at, the piece of land we're looking at, is not an agricultural field, so it doesn't provide that same agricultural setting. So that reduces the less than substantial harm, which is the term that we used for assessment for heritage purposes, to a very, very low level of less than substantial harm. This is any green area around those agricultural fields obviously contributes a little bit, but it's vastly less important to that setting which the core being the agricultural setting. The heritage officers looked at this and agreed that the existing boundary treatment, boundary planting that's quite mature anyway, but will be added to as part of the proposals, would remove any concerns about any harm to that listed setting, such that there's a nil impact, so zero impact. So it's not about weighing the public benefit at that point. It's about saying this isn't actually having a harm in the first instance.
Thank you. Do I have any further questions at all from the committee on this item? Yep. Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, just a comment, really. I'm struggling getting past the fact that it's not in the local plan and it's not in the Danbury plan, and there are a lot of objections, specifically from the ward councillors as well, who I think know the area a lot better. So, yeah, I'm struggling with this.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I too am struggling. I think it's coming down to a point of principle, isn't it? And whether at appeal, and I'm assuming that if we were to turn this down this evening, it would go to appeal, would the inspector see in the favour of this council here, or in the neighbourhood plan? That's what it boils down to. And have yet to be properly convinced that our lack of local plan, or a incoming local plan, trumps the neighbourhood plan. I think the neighbourhood plan is far more important and probably holds much more weight as far as an inspector is concerned. So I'd be really, well, as I say, horns of a dilemma is where we are. And I appeal to officers for their help, really.
Mr. Potter, would you like to come in?
Well, just in response to Councillor Wilson's request, I mean, I think you've heard, this is a finely balanced and a difficult application that's before you tonight. And there are, like many planning decisions, there's competing demands and competing needs as well. And I think you've heard also the fact that, the need for housing is a significant one, and it's not one that we can underestimate, because that's what national policy tells us to look at, because we should be significantly boosting our supply of homes. That's what the National Planning Policy Framework says. Housing targets should be treated as minimums, so they're floors, not ceilings. Again, that's what National Planning Policy says. And we just need to think about, I think, as Mr. Jordan said, the adverse impacts. That's the test that you're looking at tonight. Is the adverse impact from this development at a point where, although it doesn't comply with the development plan, those other material considerations come in, those benefits come in, and it is a fine balance. There's nothing, we have to accept that. But again, I also just want the committee to be reminded of the fact that we have had situations with planning inspectors where we've had a 5-year land supply, and we've been saying our local plan is up to date, and a planning inspector has said, well, the site is okay in all other regards. Where is the harm? You need to significantly boost your housing supply. The target is a minimum, it's a floor. So it's just something for the planning committee to just consider in your deliberations in response to Councillor Wilson, in terms of trying to cut through those competing dilemmas that you have.
Thank you. A tricky one to weigh. Councillor Frascona.
I just feel that the bottom line really here is that undermining of the local plan that people have worked hard on and had faith in, and it doesn't seem right to, when it's so new, to vote against it. And also the fact that this does not seem to be in the Chelmsford plan, which we will be bringing in probably next week. So I'm confused. If it's not even in there, why this would be acceptable?
Mr. Potter.
So when we were assessing sites for inclusion into the local plan, this was a site that was considered. The proposal hadn't been actually worked up to a point where we felt that we could recommend this as a site that could be included. And that was primarily because on face value, when you look at the site access, it looks problematic, but it's because there were opportunities for the homeowner there to actually provide provision into that site and create an access. But of course, at the local plan stage, we weren't cognizant of that. So, you know, we're not going to put a site forward where we don't have the detail. But obviously the detail has come forward and you've got a planning application that we need to decide now.
Councillor Dobson.
Yes, sorry, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of minor points. If planning permission is granted tonight, I just wanted to check with the reserve matters submission, where it includes the type and style of housing, will that be required to accord with the neighbourhood plan and design guide, or whether those documents are kind of considered out of date for that purpose? And secondly, again, if it's approved, relation to condition 14 regarding lighting, the current wording doesn't refer to the DNP 10 policy on light pollution and night skies, and whether that should be referenced there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, firstly, an apology on condition 14, lighting, if I've missed the Danbury neighbourhood plan policy in that wasn't a genuine human error, omission. So it will still be, but it's the same answer for both, really. The neighbourhood plan policies and the design guide, the accompanying design guide, are part of they're part of the development plan. So that's what any formal planning application is considered against. Of course, we also have to consider other policies of the wider development plan, which includes the local plan. But yes, all of those policies would be a formal consideration of any reserve matters submission.
Do committee members have any final questions at all to help you come to a decision, or any other points you'd like to explore? Nope. Yeah, okay, fine. So I'm going to move the recommendation, and then we will see whether there is a seconder and then potentially move to votes. So I move that application 25/01780, land northeast of Littlefields, Danbury, Chelmsford, Essex, be approved subject to an agreement as indicated in the report being entered into pursuant to the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, that the Director of Sustainable Communities be authorised to grant the application subject to the conditions detailed on pages 52 to 60 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Soshin. So we're now going to move to a vote. Will all those in favour please raise your hand now? Okay. Will all those not in favour please raise their hand? Anyone abstaining? I don't think so. No. So thank you very much. Based on that, the application has been rejected. No.
So what we'd need to do now, Chair, there'd need to be an alternative motion,
Oh,
because that
okay,
one's not
fine.
been passed. So
Okay,
someone on the committee would need to put something else forward. And if committee members want to refuse the application, it would then come back to a next meeting once reasons are agreed.
Apologies, this is my first meeting chairing. So that has not gone forward. Would anyone else, or any of the other councillors now like to propose a new motion? Councillor Dobson.
Yes, I'm quite happy to propose a motion that this particular application is refused on the basis of not complying with the Danbury Neighbourhood Plan and with regard to paragraph 14, which protects neighbourhood plans. I'm sure there's a better wording which will no doubt be put through, but essentially that's the basis of my proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Dobson. So I would need a seconder for that. Yep, we've got 2 seconders there. Thank you. Are you happy with that? Yeah. Okay, fine. So can we now have a vote? So all those in favour of Councillor Dobson's motion, please raise your hand. Yep, thank you very much. All those not in favour, please raise your hand. And anyone abstaining? Thank you.
So just to confirm, that's been minded to refuse, and that would come back to the next meeting with detailed reasons.
Okay, thank you. Lovely, thank you very much. So that concludes that item. I don't know, we're going to move on to item 11, so if there's anyone who may wish to leave at this point, please feel free to do so. And can I ask that those councillors have seen the green sheet which was sent out at the end of today? If you've not, you've got time to have a quick look. We are going to move on to item number 11 now, which 25/00339, land east of Premier Lodge Hotel, Main Road, Boreham, Chelmsford, Essex. And just to mention at this point, obviously the green sheet was shared towards the end of today, and hopefully you've all had a chance to read that. Can I ask planning officers to introduce their presentation?
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for a bio-CNG refuelling facility at a site just to the east of junction 19 of the A12 at Boreham Interchange. CNG is compressed natural gas, which is an alternative to diesel for commercial vehicle fleets.
Sorry,
Yep.
I'm unable to hear you. Sorry, could you get closer to the mic?
Yes, of course. I do apologise.
Thank you.
Shuffle up a bit. CNG is compressed natural gas, which is an alternative to diesel for commercial vehicle fleets. It results in cleaner air, lower emissions, and quieter engines. The site's adjacent to the Premier Inn at Boreham Interchange, just to the east, and its associated car parking. The land is partly surfaced, of the application site is partly surfaced and used for vehicle container storage. Access to the site would be in the position of the existing access from Colchester Road. Site is opposite the Grade 1 listed Boreham House and its registered park and garden. This angled aerial view gives a bit more perspective on the site, you can see under the orange circle, which roughly indicates where the application site is, the existing lorry trailers and such like on the site and existing surfacing. You also see to the south, near the bottom of the slide, part of the elongated canal that runs to the front of Boreham House and is part of its registered garden. Again, to give further context, this indicates the approximate distance between the site and the edge of the Boreham defined settlement. Again, to the south, you can see more of the canal, and Boreham House is just off the image on the screen. The proposal would include surfacing, pump islands and associated plant. The related plant would be for a limited amount of gas storage, compressors, substations, coolers and such like. This is a slide showing an existing CNG facility at Leyland in Lancashire, which gives a good impression of what the plant, the associated plant, will look like. The proposal includes significant planting. This is to mitigate the impact of the development on the surrounding countryside and the setting of Boreham House. This is in 2 substantive blocks of new planting on the south side of the site, with a number of semi-mature trees being planted. The idea being that that provides a dense screen in due course. The most relevant policy is policy DM8, which concerns new buildings and structures in the rural area. And this lists types of development that are acceptable in the rural area. And these include, at point 3 of the policy, local transport infrastructure, which is what this development represents. So the proposal is for an acceptable type of development in principle in the rural area. I'll now turn to need. The application includes a detailed study of why this site has been chosen, indicates other locations along the A12 in the vicinity of Chelmsford which are being considered but not selected. The map of the UK and Ireland that you see there shows existing CNG facilities, and you can see if you draw a line from the Wash to the Severn, there are not many in southeast England or southern England at all. The nearest one to Chelmsford is just on the other side of the Dartford crossing. The proposed access arrangements are acceptable. The site is located close to the junction 19 and the nearby employment uses and their vehicle fleets. These include Royal Mail, DPD and Aldi. The proposal's acceptable in terms of highway safety and its impact on the Boreham interchange and the wider road network. And there are no objections to the proposal from National Highways or Essex Highways. A bit more detail of the woodland mix which would be planted as part of the landscaping scheme for the development. Emphasis on screening the site from the listed Boreham House and its registered garden. So, turning now to the effects of the development on Boreham House. Policy requires that any heritage harm should be outweighed by public benefits. It's accepted that there would be a change to the wider setting of Boreham House, but the proposed planting would provide a dense landscape screen in due course. this view is taken from the entrance to Boreham House across the road towards the site. So if you can imagine a fairly dense landscape screen there, we are content that that would screen the development from the listed building and the garden. The result of the development is judged to be minor harm, offset by the environmental benefits of the proposal. And this slide sets out the harm versus the benefits, and significant weight is given to the landscaping and the public benefits of a significant reduction in HGV emissions. So turning finally to a concluding slide, this is an acceptable form of development in the rural area. It's well related to the strategic road network and the existing gas pipeline. There are no objections in terms of highway capacity or highway safety. There are significant environmental benefits through the reduction in HGV emissions. A landscaping and sympathetic lighting scheme is proposed to mitigate visual impacts, and officers' conclusion is that the public benefits outweigh the minor harm to heritage impacts. The proposal meets the test for achieving sustainable development, and the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a couple of questions from the public. So if I could start with Mrs. Ines. So you have 2 minutes if you could come forward to the microphone.
Thank you, Chair. Claire Innes from Aquila, the developers of the scheme. This application represents a key opportunity for Chelmsford to take positive action in addressing sustainable transport solutions in response to the climate emergency. This will be the first facility of its kind along the A12 corridor and at the leading edge of environmental sustainability. Diesel powers almost all HGVs and is one of the worst polluters of the atmosphere, primarily because of the toxic smog-forming and health-damaging pollutions they emit. Powering a vehicle fleet with compressed natural gas from a sustainable biomethane source is a radically environmentally friendly option. It gives rise to about 90% less CO2 emissions and 75% less nitrous oxide, and so is an extremely positive contributor to decarbonisation. In the search for a suitable site, 15 other locations along the A12 were considered, but none met the relevant criteria, in particular access to high-pressure gas. Policy DM8 of your local plan encourages exactly this kind of innovative transport, and we have adhered to the strict policy criteria, and particularly the provision of extensive landscaping scheme, which will be a significant improvement on the existing unscreened lorry park. We are conscious of the objections raised by Boreham residents who understandably wish to maintain the separation of the village. We believe that the green wedge is not threatened by the application, as the proposed development consolidates and concentrates transport-related development, including the existing hotel, close to the adjacent junction in a logical and defensible way, with vehicle movements directly to and from the A12. No objections have been raised by Newhall School following their acquisition of Boreham House. In conclusion, this proposal provides necessary transportation infrastructure to assist with the transition to net zero, and we believe warrants your strong support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have now a question from Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Chair. I have two considerations for the committee. The first is around the potential risk related to high pressure storage of the bio-CNG. Currently there's no risk assessment that has been undertaken for the proximity of these storage units close to, on one side, the Premier Inn and the Grange, both of which will share access with the proposed site. On the other side of this proposed site, there's several residential houses and small businesses in huts. And then, of course, we're very close to the A12, the main railway, and, as mentioned, Boreham House. The main concerns around the pressure are the tanks must operate at 3,600 psi and will need to be checked and maintained regularly, and the highly inflammable nature excuse me, of bio-CNG means that if it's not handled correctly and not all the safety risks are not adhered to, then there's a potential accident with all those local, the hotel and restaurant and the resident houses very close by. CNG's fuel states that locations should be near to dense logistic or distribution hubs, and Boreham / this location certainly does not meet that criteria. The second concern is around long-term sustainability of biofuels. There's a question around source of the feeding materials not always being consistent, and this can lead to impurities. Impurities, if not handled correctly, can cause the erosion of metal parts of vehicles. But to get around that, they would have to install additional software, data analysis tools, which is an additional cost for the company to be able to maintain that. But the main issue around sustainability is that the low energy content. So vehicles running on CNG deliver less power compared to petrol, accelerate and performances will feel sluggish, and vehicles typically have shorter driving ranges per tank. So
I'm afraid you must sum up.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Then I have questions from Mrs. Reid, Mr. Kyle and Mr. Martin, but I don't believe that any of them are here this evening. Nope, your questions have though been received and read, in which case we move on to Mr. Swash.
Before I start, I just wanted to say that it's unfortunate today is holiday time, bank holiday week. 3 people you've mentioned would have been here this evening. We've tried to incorporate some of the things they were going to say within the questions we put forward. But I've tried to get this into 2 minutes. I think I'm struggling. Anyway, starting. You've all experienced Junction 19, and you've all had great pleasure driving around Junction 19. This site is about 150 yards, 150 metres from Junction 19. And they are proposing another 450 HGVs per day. How is that junction going to actually cope with that sort of traffic? Both the national highways have said that by 27, the Junction 19 will be at capacity. Chelmsford City Council's own consultant said that without investment in Junction 19, future development is impractical. The national planning policy requires that development should only be refused on highways, and they set out the criteria for that. And this scheme fails on all the points that are raised in that criteria. The applicant states that it's expected that the trips would be from local roads, and yet, as has been explained, it is the only one in the southeast or in this region, and therefore it's going to attract HGVs off of the A12, off the major trunk roads. And so we believe that the whole transport issue is poorly thought through. The applicant was asked back in March last year to provide a further vehicle assessment. That has not, even to date, that has not been provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move to questions from parish tier representatives. I understand that we have Councillor Elkington from Boreham Parish Council here. Yeah. Would you like to come forward? Thank you. And you have slightly longer, you have 5 minutes.
I don't think I'll need 5 minutes, but thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. The visual impact on this proposed development on Boreham Village, and in particular the area where the facility would be sited, would be really severe. It is, as has been pointed out so far, this is countryside, this is rural, and it seems completely inappropriate to put something such as this biofuel filling depot in an area of that sort. That's my first point. My second point is the safeguarding zone to keep Boreham separate from Chelmsford's urban sprawl. This is a kind of demilitarised zone between Chelmsford coming out and the village of Boreham. This has been part of the long discussions with Chelmsford City Council planning in the preparation of the neighbourhood plan. This is one of the most important issues for the Boreham village community, and is reflected and incorporated in the neighbourhood plan, having previously been incorporated in the village design statement adopted in 2010. The neighbourhood plan has now been reviewed and approved by an independent planning inspector and becomes a material consideration in planning applications, and decision makers must give it weight when assessing development proposals in the area. If this application was now to be approved, it would fly in the face of the neighbourhood plan process and go against one of the most important planning considerations for the Boreham village community. And my third point is, many previous applications have been refused for this site. 3 applications are listed as refused on the Chelmsford Planning website, and all of the others were withdrawn by applicants when they realised they were unlikely to succeed, and therefore they did not get listed on the planning portal. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to ward councillors now, and we've got Councillor Raven here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, as you just heard, obviously the neighbourhood plan hasn't actually been adopted yet, but is very close, hopefully in the next few months for Boreham. This site wasn't selected in the recent local plan consultation, where the council instead proposed expanding the Waltham Road industrial site from 3,500 square metres to 14,000 square metres. This is strong evidence that the council does not consider this location appropriate for new infrastructure. The proposal is not plan-led and undermines the emerging local plan evidence base. Obviously, we've heard about all the planting to be done, but obviously this will take many years to mature and would have an impact on Boreham House, especially with the gas vents, which are 5 metres high. The main concern that I do have, and calling it in for, is for highways. There's been no evidence of pedestrian movement associated with Boreham House and the train station, as Boreham House obviously hopefully will become an educational facility in the next few years. So you potentially will have children and people crossing the road to get to the bus stops on the other side of the road. And obviously now the train station is open, there is a lot of people that walk down that footpath to get to the train station, which will cross the entrance to that site. The only information on the Highways Authority was assessing the HGV manoeuvring and not pedestrian safety. The site is open obviously 24/7, and obviously people will be coming back from the train station late at night, and obviously lorries will come in and out, so obviously there's a risk window there. So yeah, mainly based on these points, that's why I'd ask you to refuse this application.
Thank you very much. So a number of different points raised there. Perhaps let's start with the questions around Junction 19 and highways and vehicle assessments, if I can hand over to highways. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so the applicant has submitted a transport assessment which outlined their vehicle movements to and from the site. This used existing compressed natural gas sites, and they averaged out, according to the number of pumps at this stage, this site, the vehicle movements they estimate. In the AM peak, it was between 8 and 16, and in the PM peak, it was between 7 and 14, I believe. In terms of junction, the A12 junction, this isn't considered a sort of severe or significant impact on that junction, and therefore that's why an objection wasn't raised on that matter. Furthermore, a lot of the vehicle movements were spread across the 24-hour period, which means that they were sort of throughout the day rather than all at peak times when it's most heavily congested. Sort of, and as my colleague pointed out as well, sort of over 5% is where we typically look at, and this sort of falls significantly below that given the number of vehicles on junction 19 already. With regards to the pedestrian movements, the site wasn't expected to generate any, so no additional pedestrian infrastructure was requested for this matter. Furthermore, the Boreham House application wasn't submitted at that stage, and therefore this application didn't necessarily need to consider that at that time, and that application will have to address that accordingly. Thanks.
Someone's got their hand up. No. I'm afraid we're not allowed to take questions that haven't been submitted. To move on to one of the other points that was raised, so the visual impact and the mitigation factors around that, it'd be interesting if we could hear a little bit more about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just go back to...
Can you get nearer again?
Okay. Is that okay? If we go back to one of the slides that was shown previously, this indicates the distance between the edge of the built-up part of Boreham and the application site. It's around 600 metres, so any encroachment into that zone is going to be really very limited. And we have further slides which didn't show in the presentation, if you just bear with me, which are views taken from, this one is taken from Paynes Lane towards the application site. Now bear in mind additional planting would go in to screen the development. The development does not contain any buildings, and it will be seen against the backdrop of existing buildings, and at present there is the existing storage that's taking place on the site, which would be removed. This further image is taken from the edge of the defined settlement in Boreham towards the development site, and as you can see, any perception of the new development is going to be quite limited from that sort of distance, and we do not feel that it would be so harmful in terms of encroachment towards Boreham Village that would warrant refusal of the application.
Thank you. Obviously, we also had the point raised about the neighbourhood plan and how this development would fit with that, if you're able to speak to that as well.
Well, the neighbourhood plan refers to, I can't remember what the precise wording of it was, a safeguarding zone. This is a similar point, really, that the application site is within the safeguarding zone, as is the existing neighbouring development at the Premier Inn. Our position is that the distance between this site and the edge of the village is such that it's the same point, really, that with the additional planting, the harms are minimised, and we do not feel there is enough strength in the argument of encroachment into the safeguarding zone to warrant refusal on that basis.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open up the debate now for committee members. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the flow of traffic, there was a comment about obviously there's an increase in heavy lorries that would move through junction 19 back onto the A12 and from the A12. But if you're heading east and you know the junction 19 does get congested, what's to stop those lorries heading down Boreham, the main road in Boreham, through Hatfield Peveril, and then onto the A12 just after Hatfield Peveril? So I can see there's a risk in those roads, that road being used for heavy lorries or additional heavy lorries.
Yeah, and we obviously totally accept that might happen. Typically HGVs use their A12 or the strategic road network where possible, and they will get on it as soon as possible due to the nature of the vehicle. But I mean, yeah, ultimately, if there is an incident, we can't stop
So you
them
can't
from
control
using
it?
No.
Right. Second question. May I have a second question?
Yes, you may have a second question.
The Historic England made some comments about Boreham House, and I know that's not been raised, but the fact is they pretty much rejected the proposal in their comments, and saying that there wasn't enough provision to secure that building. And I'm thinking in terms of the vision and also the additional movement of lorries in front of that building, would that cause any intrinsic damage or anything to the building itself? It's a Grade 1 listing building, I understand.
The position of Historic England is one where they are concerned about the development, but it becomes a question of how much harm is caused as a result of the development to the setting of the listed building. The harm is defined as less than significant harm, and it's felt that it is the harm is on the minor end of that. So the general feeling is that the harm to the listed building would be outweighed by the benefits of the development, which is the right way to approach this form of development. The fact there is a listed building there doesn't mean that no development can take place within its vicinity, but there needs to be an assessment of harm and how that harm is mitigated and what the other benefits of the proposal are in terms of the planning balance.
I'll let someone else ask. I've got one more question.
Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have the image of the access and egress off the site, please? Block A, Block B, and then the overview.
Is this image suitable for
yeah, this will
what
do.
you want
Thank
to say?
you. It's not quite the one I'm looking
Okay.
at in the plan, but that's fine. Yep, back. Yep, that's the one. That's it. So just so I understand this correctly, the vehicles will turn left into the site, go around the site, and then come out. And will they be turning left only, or will they be turning left or right? Is there a turn only left? Otherwise they're crossing, sorry, I beg your pardon. Otherwise they're crossing oncoming traffic. Slow moving vehicles crossing oncoming traffic, sorry.
The expectation is that vehicles would be accessing and egressing the site predominantly via Boreham Interchange. So they would come in and there'll be a left turn, and the expectation is that vehicles would emerge and then turn right back towards Boreham Interchange.
So crossing oncoming traffic. Slow moving vehicles crossing oncoming traffic, is that correct?
Yes, it's a manoeuvre from the site across to the left-hand side of the road to travel towards Boreham Interchange, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, did you want to come back with your question?
Yeah, it was just mentioned. I just want to understand the benefits outweighing, you know, the risk to Boreham House. What is the economic value to Chelmsford of this locating this business here? I just want to understand, is it employment or another reason?
Could just bear with me. Can I refer you to the report, paragraph 6.93 to 6.104. That sets out the planning balance, and in terms of the economic benefits, it's a relatively generic benefit in that it would not provide any significant number of jobs, except during the construction period. But it would have ongoing benefits during the operational phase in terms of serving businesses within the locality with a more sustainable form of fuel. There, we also set out the social benefits and the environmental benefits. Of greatest weight, we feel, are the environmental benefits as set out in that section of the report.
Thank you.
Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. Just for my information, do vehicles have to convert their vehicle to receive this fuel?
My understanding is that it's a different form of vehicle. I don't believe they are converted, but I can't be 100% sure of that.
We had just one additional point that I don't think we'd covered from the initial set of questions. So it was a question about the safety of compressed gas and proximity to houses.
Yes, this matter lies outside the remit of planning. It would be a matter for other legislation and covered by the Health and Safety Executive. But the assumption is, as with all developments, that it be carried out in accordance with best practice and the requirements of other legislation.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid to the gentleman and the lady who have their hands up in the public gallery, we're not taking any further questions from the public. They had to be submitted by 7 p.m. yesterday. So can I move on, Councillor Hyland? Oh, sorry, not Councillor Clark.
Thank you. It was just following on from Councillor Hyland's comment about the entrance and the exit of this site. It would be more practical if the entrance was from the Boreham Road for a left turn onto the site and the exit was onto the junction. As someone who has an HGV licence, I can tell you that it would be more practical for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frascona.
Hi, just two questions. First was, I'm not totally clear about the number of vehicle movements, the number of HEV vehicle movements. We seem to have some conflicting numbers. And if they were as low as was being suggested by Essex Highways, I wonder that the facility is kind of economically viable, actually. Secondly, I'm not clear about the kind of, we've talked about the Boreham local plan. Where, you know, how far, where is their jurisdiction? How far does their jurisdiction go? Does it go as far as this development, or does it cut off kind of halfway between Chelmsford and Boreham? I'm not clear.
If I could deal with that, the last point. The Boreham neighbourhood plan covers the entire parish of Boreham, and that includes all of this application site. In terms of matters relating to highways, I don't know whether highways colleagues have anything further to add to previous advice.
Thank you. Highways, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I can just add a bit further to that. So my comments earlier were regarding the AM and PM peaks. However, there was a table within the transport assessment which provided average arrival rates per hour for 5 sites which have been in use for a while, the compressed natural gas sites. That was obviously a lot higher. Over a 24-hour period, it was 269 vehicles, so 538 vehicle movements per day, estimated. However, that was sort of more or less generally spread over every hour, sort of had between 10 and 12 vehicle movements, and it was very consistent over the 24-hour period. So when we look at the traditional AM and PM peaks, they were vehicles, not movements. So you would typically have between sort of 8 vehicles, so 16 movements in the AM peak, and then very similar in the PM peak as well.
Councillor Soshin.
I've got a couple of concerns. It's mainly about pedestrians. I do know that exit very well, and I try to cross there very carefully. I assure you it's dangerous. It's just as people come off junction 19, people start to increase their speed again. And on that left-hand side, I find it extremely dangerous to try and cross to the bus stop over the other side. And it does happen. I mean, there are businesses on that left-hand side closer than Boreham House, including the restaurant that's there. And it is not just cars that turn out of there, but every car has to be extremely careful. So that bothers me. So I'm not quite sure about this yet. And the other concern I have is that a couple of years ago, one of those fields just further up from that junction was on fire. And that was extremely dangerous. So it's possible that fires on those fields, and it took a long time to cut them out, I believe, to turn them on, to stop the fires. If that spread towards that facility, that could make a dangerous position. I think other than that, there is enough space between them, but they are farmers' fields that can catch on fire. But it's, I think that is obviously once occasionally, but it does worry me about the fact that there's no pedestrian thinking about the pedestrians involved there, not necessarily to Boreham House, but from the businesses that would be next to it. So I'm not quite sure about that yet.
Thank you very much for those comments. I don't know whether Highways has anything to add, or officers have anything to add on the pedestrian safety element to this.
We don't have any objection on highway safety grounds from the Highway Authority. On that basis, we don't really have any locus to to object on that basis.
Thank you. Councillor Hazel Clark.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, sorry. We saw a map with some similar development sites across the country, and I've read somewhere that they're mainly located near industrial sites, light industry, employment sites. I wondered if any of them are similarly close to residential areas as this one. And the second question was health and safety related, was have there been any serious health and safety incidents at any of the other similar sites?
We do not have information on how close the other sites are to residential property, and we don't have any information about incidents at other sites. But to repeat what I said previously, the assumption is, when dealing with a case such as this, that the site is run in accordance with best practice and in accordance with the relevant legislation which lies outside of planning legislation.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions at all from committee members about this item? So, based on that, and given that no other alternative motions have come forward yet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to propose that I move the application 25/00339 land east of Premier Lodge Hotel, Main Road, Boreham, Chelmsford, be approved subject to the conditions detailed on pages 91 to 95 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Will all those in favour of approving the application please raise their hand? Will all those not in favour of approving the application raise their hand? Will all those abstaining please raise their hand?
So that's 4-4, so it would be a casting vote for yourself.
Okay, fine. I will vote for. I will be voting for as well.
Seconds. That's all.
I'm very sorry about that. Right. So the application has been approved and we'll move on to item 12, which is planning appeals. Members will have seen the latest information on planning appeals. These are for your information. And the meeting is now closed at 9:12 p.m. Thank you.